Good morning. I'm Bill Ashton from the Rural Development Institute here at Brandon University. Thanks for signing on. We're trying to make connections with the speaker. It worked yesterday really well, and we're still just making connections. So we're about 5 minutes, 6 minutes out. For those that are interested, there's at the bottom of the screen, there's a chat box. If you want to send messages, you can do that, just so you know that we're trying to get her connected. Thank you. Thanks. Just so you know that you've signed on to a webinar from the Rural Policy Learning Commons here at Brandon University. The title is called Consequences of Rural Outmigration on Structural Change in Agriculture in Serbia. Serbia, sorry. Thank you.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry for all the inconveniences for all the participants, but something went wrong with the ID that I received in the previous mail.
Not a problem. It's Bill Ashton here at the Rural Development Institute. Welcome.
Thank you.
We'll get on with the short introduction and get you put up the slides so you can move forward, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Let me at the beginning thank to all the participants for your time and for your interest for my presentation. I'm Natalia Bogdanov, coming from the Faculty of Agriculture of Belgrade University from Serbia, and my today's topic relates to rural outmigration in Serbia. So let me start since we are already in July. Is it okay for you?
Yes, we're just bringing up your slide presentations right now, so just give us a second, please.
Okay.
Oh, you have the slides. Just go ahead and initiate your slides then.
Okay.
And Philomena Delima from Scotland will be also receiving questions at the end and sharing it.
Okay, thank you.
Philomena.
Okay, let me start. Does it work? Do you can see it now?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so my presentation has the title "The Consequences of Rural Outmigration on the Structural Changes in Agriculture in Serbia." And for those who are out of Europe or are not well familiar with the European geography, here is where the Serbia is located. That is the country at the southeastern part of Europe, located in Balkan Peninsula and surrounded with the Mediterranean countries, very close to Black Sea, Asian region, and the central part of Europe as well. So the country characterized by diversity of its rural areas in many terms, starting from the landscape, the characteristics and the performances of agricultural sector and family farms, and as well by its very diverse and highly heterogeneous countryside, starting from the lowland that is mostly on the northern part of country over the hilly area to high mountain areas in the southern part and the eastern and western borders of the Serbia. To give you an impression about the importance of agricultural sector for national economy and rural well-being, just let me say that agricultural sector contributes to about 10% to national economy. Over 20 people are employed in agricultural sector, and one of the major characteristics of Serbian agriculture is that the country is very rich with land resources and among the top European countries from the perspective of number of hectares per capita, including arable land per capita as well, and very rich with its biodiversity and natural resources are very favorable for agricultural production. The research objective of my presentation is to contribute to design the conceptual framework for study on impact of migration on structural changes in Serbian agriculture, and I'm going to do that by providing an overview on the current state of migration and its relevance for the rural areas. Then I will present few theoretical aspects that are relevant for my research, and then present the result of two case study researchers on the magnitude and spatial patterns of rural outmigration and its impact on structural changes in the sector. And I'm going to conclude by proposing the research framework for further empirical analysis on this subject in my country. What is the motivation for this topic, and how the topic is relevant for Serbia? Let me say that in recent decades, Serbia experienced, like many other Southeastern European and Eastern European countries, a profound shift in the country population and its redistribution from the rural to urban areas, but out of country as well. The literature on rural to urban migration in Serbia is vast, but it focuses mostly on migration-induced changes in population distribution, and my colleagues and previous research mostly deals with demographical phenomena induced by rural to urban migration. In recent time, thanks to some donor projects and the interest of World Bank and other international institutions dealing with the rural issues in Serbia and who are interested in Serbian economy as general, there are several studies that analyzes the effects of remittances and focuses mostly on economic growth and the contribution of remittances to economic growth. Still, we don't have any insights, and there are any research that deals exclusively with out-migration patterns of rural people and consequences on agricultural holdings. Both the scientists and the policy decision makers did not show any interest up to now what is going on in rural areas with such a huge migrations and with a few waves of migration that country experienced up to now. Serbia has a long-standing history of out-migration, and just to give you an impression what is the story behind, the intense emigration started at the mid-60s, and with the first wave of migrants in Western Europe, since the ex-Yugoslavia was one of the few European countries with a special bilateral agreement with the Western European countries to send the workers on temporary work on those countries. And at that time, in a period between the 70s and 90s, over the 70% of emigrants were from rural areas, approximately out of which 80% went to France, Austria, and to Germany. Diverse driving factors were relevant during the 90s, in a time where the war happened in the former Yugoslavia, so the migrations of that time were motivated by political factors, economic factors, and humanitarian reasons behind, but a largest wave of immigrants as well as emigrants from Serbia happened during the 90s due to the fact that there were many refugees, over 300,000 people from ex-Yugoslav countries that entered in Serbia at that time, and most of them left the country and emigrated to the Western Europe or to America. Recent migration trends indicate significant regional differences in migration patterns and differences in the structure of migrants and their livelihood strategies. To give you an understanding what I am actually speaking about, here are the pictures of the main development of this phenomenon in Serbia, starting from 70s. The first one is the photo of the first Gastarbeiters in Germany, first wave of migrants from Yugoslavia and from Serbia as well, those who came to the Munich, to the Stuttgart and other big industrial cities and regions to Western Europe, the refugees and internally displaced persons during the war of 90s who came with who emigrated actually from ex-Yugoslav countries. Most of them went, particularly those who were poor or poorest, to rural areas. At that time, the whole region had the visa requirements were introduced over the Balkan population, and you can see the rows instead of in front of embassies of Western European countries at that time. And since the 2000, at the end of 2000s, at the beginning of 2010s, the visa regime was abolished over the Serbian citizens, and the brain drain started as the phenomenon that affects other Southeastern European countries as well. So in 4 photos, all the story about the migration, I think, is much more clearer to you who are not familiar with the region and with what's happened in last few decades here in Balkan. So if we are looking on the figures and the recent statistics, here are some figures on the share of on the amount of the Serbian population that lives abroad. Most recent census of 2011, the figure says that over 4% of total Serbian population living abroad, and we can see how those developments that I explained were in since starting from the 70s. However, here is the moment to stress out or to underline that official statistics, like in other countries, cannot capture all those who have some, let's say, attachments toward the foreign countries and who are leaving time to time due to the job opportunities out of country and whatever. But an official statistics says that that the Serbian diaspora is among the biggest in Europe, and that somewhere between 2 to 3 million people lives in Western Europe or in America that belong somehow, that are somehow attached to their families in Serbia. And the next graph shows how the inflow of remittances is important for the Serbian national economy. The recent data of World Bank says that somewhere of about 8% of Serbian GDP comes from the remittances. Whether it is small or it is the big share of remittances in our economy, let me say that the country with the highest share in Europe is Moldova, where the remittances contributed over 20% to national GDP. And you can see that Serbia among the, let's say, top 10 or even top 5 in Europe concerning the importance of remittances for the national economy and the GDP. So when we look into the rural population and how it's relevant for them, let's say that over 6% of total rural population live abroad and make up almost 60% of Serbian total immigration. And one important characteristics of rural immigrants are that they are staying abroad and living abroad for a longer time. That is the case for the urban population. It means that their migration started earlier. They were those by whom migration waves dominated, and it's normal. And as we can see from the very recent data, over 50% of those who are living abroad are those from the rural areas. Some of the photos in favor of what are the consequences of such a huge emigration and such long-standing emigration of Serbian rural population. As a result or as a consequence, we have the abandoned villages and the abandoned good and quality agricultural land. The most rural families in some parts of Serbia relies on cash or an in-kind personal transfers to families or by the members who are living mostly in Western Europe. And since few years ago, 2-3 years ago, Serbia became a key waypoint of two major migrant routes across the southeastern Europe for those who are coming from the south, from the Greece, or even those who are coming from the Turkey. The Serbia is on their way to Western Europe, and those are the migrants from Syria crossing the rural areas of Serbia on their way to Western Europe. So, few words about the research design and methods I used in my research. Here, I have to point out that I followed recommendations of many authors who argue that this kind of research on the consequences of outmigration has to be done or should be done on based on the two-step analysis, where we have at first defined a research framework, and therefore they suggest to start by case studies and then go to the empirical research. Therefore, I made an extensive literature review to define the theoretical framework and what we can say about the theories on international migration. That they are studied by different disciplines with different assumptions, hypotheses, and different level of analysis. But many authors, particularly the Haas, then the Billsborough, and many others are very explicit that theories on the consequences of migration missing because of widespread controversy on the nature, causes, and the consequences of migration, and as well as due to the different and sometimes conflicting findings. We have in my research another very complex issue. It is the theories on the structural changes in agriculture. Although the phenomenon of structural changes is extensively elaborated in the literature, and it is still a phenomenon that have been analyzed within the comprehensive framework and without consensus among the researchers from an agricultural economy perspective, which aspects, which dimensions has to be measured, and how to compare different results from different parts of the world. Normally and usually the authors consider structural changes in agriculture from the perspective of the classical economic theory, and then a long-term phenomenon that occurs over a relatively long period of time, and relying on the factors of physical size of holding, farm size distribution according to number of farms in the total number, farm labor distribution, farming operation, technological changes, access to the market, access to the information, to the new technologies, and many others. But still, the theory behind the structural changes in agriculture quite diverse, as is the case with the theories of international migration. So the both concepts are very complex, multidimensional, and requires a very strong focus and a very explicit research framework before we start with the empirical studies. The research objective was to the selection of territory units for further analysis, then recognize and identifying key dimensions of structural changes that are caused by outmigration, and select an appropriate sample of participants, which means that how to profile the migrant and migrant households, and how to define the control group for the experimental research. The selection of research area was done based on the secondary data from population census that was done in 2011, but what we found that the statistics, the official Serbian statistics, although it is how to say, measure the immigration and somehow succeed to capture the migrants even in the previous census, still the data is insufficiently reliable due to under-registration and under-coverage, which are the factors that are listed in other literature as well. We also made an effort to look on data collected by statistics of receiving immigrant receiving countries, most on German statistics and Austrian statistics, but we found that there is a great discrepancy between what we registered here comparing what they have in their statistics, and we can definitely cannot rely in none of those sources. So based on the findings from the census, a multi-locational case study approach was selected, and two the districts were recognized as relevant, let's say, for the further study on migration. The one region is Eastern Serbia, region which characterized with the long-lasting rural out-migration, and within the districts you can find the municipalities with over 30% of working population living abroad. So you can imagine how intense a migration from this part of country are when you have over 30% of the people in working age that are relying on the income from abroad. And another region we found that is very, let's say, more interesting than relevant is the region of southern Banat, which is not distinguished by prevalence of external migrants, but with a significant migration trend among the national minorities who live in this area and whose countries in the meantime became the EU members. A region characterized with that newly emerged pattern of ethnic migrants, and we were focused in our research on a Slovak national minority. Data collected by non-structural interviews with the key persons and the groups on the 3 dimensions: how the local economy looks like, what are the migrant characteristics and type and patterns of migration, and how the remittances are important for the household's well-being, and what are the saving or investing patterns of migrant sending households. So to present where the regions are on which districts we were focused, on the left Serbian map you can see green marked the areas and the districts, municipalities where the internally displaced person and refugees came during the 90s, and those municipalities were recorded increase in their population between the 90s and 2000s. And on the right side you can see those regions that are marked by dark colors, which are characterized by a huge emigration, mostly to EU 15 countries, and the region where the national minorities migrate to Hungary, to Slovak, to Romania, to their mother countries that in meantime during the at the beginning of 2000s became the EU members. And here are the results, what we found in each of those regions. The first, I will start with the region, the results from the region with the long-lasting migration. What are the characteristics of their local economy and agricultural system? The region characterized by a farm structure that dominated by medium-sized farms with a mixed family farms and mixed family economy, where the families and the family economy most relies on remittances due to the lack of jobs out of farming and in active land market. There you can find here a lot of abandoned land or not cultivated according to let's say the standards for the rest of country due to lack of human activity. We can find here also the examples of land degradation and nature degradation, environmental degradation as well, and elderly people prevail among the rural population in this area. Massive and long lasting out-migration started with the first wave of migrants since the beginning of the 70s, and different types of migrant families in terms of employment status of member abroad, length of stay, and different stage of their lives. So now we found there are also some younger people who are second, third, even fourth generation of those who left the country at the beginning of 70s, who are coming time to time in Serbia, who don't have a regular status. Let's say they don't have citizenships in Western European countries, and they are some potentially new migrants or those who are looking for seasonal jobs in Western European countries with their parents. They are with their parents in parents' home, coming in Serbia very often just to regulate those, let's say, institutional requirements regarding the period they can stay without working visa abroad and these kind of things. And what we were interested much more for is how are they spent the remittances they earn in the Western European countries for staying there for decades. So the literature says that the remittance is mostly invested in consumption, and that is something that is, let's say, the general phrase about the consequences and the effects of remittances and whatever. In this picture on the left side, you can see what means spending the remittances on consumption, and as the other auto stress out on construction. In Serbian case, the construction means those huge houses that are now empty. Most of them are locked for, let's say, 11 months during the years, because they are owners and their parents and grandparents coming here for just for the holidays on a few days, or certainly none of them live here because they did not invest their money in new jobs or in sustainable businesses in rural areas. What they refer that due to the unfavorable business environment, they were not ready to invest in Serbia, although they started some investments, particularly in agriculture, buying the land, buying the new machinery, establishing the new activities related to agriculture and diversify their agricultural businesses. All these investments stopped at the beginning of the 90s, not just because of the war, but because of transition that affected national economy, particularly the agricultural sector, with the trade liberalization, and that they failed to establish any sustainable businesses related to agricultural sector and or any other activity in their rural areas. Anyhow, what the elder people who back to the Serbia and now permanently stay in Serbia are faced with is the fact that they are at the risk of poverty. Those who are in the pension, who are disabled or single person household, just because they went to the Germany, Austria, France, or wherever, they were mostly involved in, let's say, a gray economy in the black labor market, and therefore now their pensions are too low even for the Serbian circumstances. They cannot survive with such low income from social security that they are receiving from the countries where they spend their careers and their working ages. So they are on the risk to losing the social and economical security, and also they suffer due to the personal security and safety issues, since the most of those villages are empty and only the elderly people live there. What is the case with the region with the new ethnic pattern of immigration? Here we are speaking of an area of the Serbia which characterized by capital-intensive agricultural sector with a sharply dual farm structure, where the land leasing market active as well, but more than land sales, with a high share of income arising from the leasing of farmland, and where the agricultural sector is quite well developed with the the performances of agricultural sector in this region are, let's say, very comparable with those in Western European countries. Still, the people are decide to migrate, particularly those who are home countries, as I said, in EU, and what they refer is that they are driven by immigration policy of their mother countries. For example, the Slovaks, on which our case study was done, refer that there are a lot of, let's say, opportunities for the Slovaks who are ready to go from Serbia, but as well from Romania or for other countries, who are ready to move in to Slovakia, because there are a lot of opportunities for their children, for let's say better education, for better jobs in those countries that are offered by new way of industrialization of new EU member states, and not just the young people who are migrated due to the education, but also the middle-aged people with their families decide to move, since they see much more business opportunities in those countries than it is the case in Serbia. What makes the difference among those people and other people in the previous case is that they are not poor and they are not driven by push factors, let's say. They are much more driven by pull factors and better opportunity and better, how to say, promises for their children. So the picture on the left side illustrates the very, how to say, specific ethnical groups of Slovaks in Serbia, and what is on the picture is they are famous with the naive paintings, and you can find their paintings on UNICEF Christmas cards and this kind of things. And this one represents 300 years since they came into the Serbia in Austro-Hungarian time, and after 300 years staying here, they said that they are ready to go, although they spent their lives here during the war, but now no more time, as they said, to stay anymore, since they don't see any perspective for their families and their children. So the remittances are less important for migrant and for migrant sending households' well-being. Their families do not rely on what they will send home. They have some savings when they are moving from the Serbia, and they are driven by opportunity to start new jobs and to start new businesses in Slovak Republic. When they were asked, but what is the perspective of your farm, since their farms are huge, over 10, 20 hectares, even 100 hectares, they said that they will never be ready to sold it, because it is how to say, they still they will always look on Serbia as their country, but they hope that they will never be in position to sell it, which means that it will affect the changes in farm structure among those who will stay in the area. So to conclude and to suggest a few elements relevant for the research design. The consequences of rural out-migration on agriculture and rural sector are complex and mixed, as I presented for both of those regions, but we have to select a proper research question for both of them. So for the region with the long-lasting migration, seems that consequences of out-migration on farm structure and land distribution are the relevant research questions, as well as land use patterns and changes in farm labor and adaptation of the new technological improvements in agricultural sector. For the region with the newer emergency of ethnic migration, the relevant topic could be the consequences of out-migration on land rents and saving and investment patterns of migrant sending households, because as I said, their families are not poor, and the question is how they will going to invest their money, whether they will invest in expanding their farms in Serbia, or they are planning to invest in new countries, let's say Slovakia and Romania, Hungary, or wherever. When it comes to territorial aggregation, we recognize that administrative units belonging to the same migration system are relevant for this kind of research, and the district level as an administrative, let's say, unit of observation is not relevant in the case of Serbia, because such unit of observation is too general to capture the micro level system of behavior and resource transfer, agricultural resource transfers among the households and among those who left behind the migrants. The time perspective seems to be very relevant for the region with a long-lasting migration, and it's normal, but we face the problem how to define and what and how to select the proper question to let's say, to represent the changes over time, starting from the 70s up to nowadays. And when it comes to the method, longitudinal panel data and in-depth survey with the representative questions related to institutional frames seems to be relevant for the region with a long-lasting migration. And here we followed as well the recommendation of the National Statistics of US, who is very good in tracking the migrants and their behavior, many other things, but seems to be that all, let's say, constraints that they refer to are also relevant for our further research, because the retrospective questions are very, how to say, it's a problematic whether we can rely on what the respondents will say and how, whether they remember correct what's happened when, and how developments were. The unit of observation is still something that we have to decide how to proceed, whether to look on a migrant or migrant households, and how out of all those who are listed here, return migrants, long-time migrants, families, households held migrant families, and many other options, how to select the proper one, because we are aware that it is not easy, and that probably the results will depend a lot based on whom we will select for the surveyed person. And as well, the most questionable question is how to define the proxy responded for migrant or migrant households, whether it is relevant. Do we have the families with the seasonal or only those with the permanent migrants, whether it is relevant who is the migrant, or women, or head of households, and many other aspects were considered in this sense. So what other factors we recognize based on this these two case studies that could be relevant for the structural changes in agriculture induced by outmigration is a huge set of socio-cultural factors like emotional attachments toward agriculture and family assets, which is the case for both those from the region of long-lasting migration and from those who are the ethnical minorities and migrate to their home countries. Then how the household decision-making is organized, then intergenerational transfer of family assets, whether the parents and grandparents are ready to transfer it to the first generation, or they it's actually the matter of the Balkan culture to stay the owners of the land till the end of their lives. And what we found, particularly in eastern part of Serbia, that there is the culture and tradition of migration among the specific ethnic groups in those regions, particularly Roma people and Vlach people, who are actually those who initiated the migration from this region and were the first who migrate and who dominate by migrants of those regions. And a few out of the social and cultural factors, few factors on family and local economy also appears to be relevant. But what we found that some other examples from the literature that are stressed in recent time, like the effects of climate change, effects of migration on climate change, technological changes, and the feminization of agriculture are not identified as a factors of importance for structural changes in the studied regions in Serbia. So we definitely will not go in this direction. Certainly those factors that I listed, we found that are relevant, And still we have the problem. We are planning to proceed with the experimental research during the summer, where the migrants coming home from their summer holidays, and when we can find the proper, let's say, migrant group to be surveyed, but still we have some debts and uncertainties how to define a unit of observation, and how to proceed with the survey. And to conclude, what we found and recognized that there is the wider relevance of undertaking further research on this topic, since the region of ethnic migration of the rural population is very relevant for other Balkan countries as well. Up to now, there is no evidence on how it affects the land market, land use patterns, and many other aspects in agriculture. So we suppose that this kind of research is relevant also for the countries from where internally displaced persons and refugees left during the war of the 90s. The same is with the region of the long-lasting migration that is relevant for all ex-EU countries, and we found that cross-country research on the impact of institutional framework, political crisis, and transitional process on investment behavior and saving patterns on migrant-centric households and dynamic of structural changes is relevant for all of those countries, since, as I presented on one of the slides, all the Balkan countries have huge impact of remittances on their GDP, and therefore we think that this issue is relevant. In none of our countries, the literature and scientists were not focused on this issue, and you cannot find any reference to in support of how it is important and how it is relevant for the Balkan countries. So that's it, and thank you very much for your attention and the patience. I did my best to compensate the time we lost at the beginning, so hope that we will have enough time for your questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. I've managed to get into the webinar as well. Finally, it's Philomena here. We still have some, that was really interesting, and I probably have some questions, but I'm going to ask people who are online to type their questions up for me, and I can read them. If people would do that, to type their questions, and I can read them out, please. Any questions for Natalia? Well, let me see. There are two, I think. Okay. One from Ray Bowman, who says it's been a very interesting presentation. Thanks. Natalia, in your study areas, what type of non-farm jobs are available?
Oh, in the study, in the area studied, non-farm jobs that are offered are mostly those in the public sector, let's say, since the industry collapsed during the 90s and during the transitional process, that transitional shock was very huge on local economies. So most of jobs are in, let's say, the public sector, those who are working for the state, for the government, in the social services like education, like public administration, like the health services, and the presence of small businesses and let's say some own businesses is very, very small. we don't have exact figures how this kind of job contributed to the local economy. It's not recorded by national statistics, but generally, if there are this kind of jobs, mostly in the trade, mostly in the construction, let's say, and that's more or less it. Some processing industry relying on agriculture, nothing else.
Maybe Ray can come back if he has any further questions. Natalia, can I ask you to switch your light on because we cannot see you?
Okay, give me the second.
And then I have some more questions. Oh, that's better. That's great.
Okay, it's better now.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. We can see you now.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions from Linamar Campos, who also says, thank you for your interesting presentation. So Linamar's question is about, is there a study undertaken about the effects of the large immigration or from which has arisen related to the refugees thing, and you know, is there? I mean, given what you were saying about the long-term, the region with the long-term migration pattern, and the problems it's experiencing of depopulation, then are refugees seen as a potential source of, you know, are those areas seen as a potential area for refugees to be settled?
Yeah, what's happened with the refugees? Yes, I do understand what the question is. The refugees came during the 90s, and the official statistics says that there were somewhere about 300,000 people that came from Bosnia, from Croatia, from Kosovo, from here and there. Anyhow, those who came where and who stayed in the rural areas were mostly those who are poorest people among those who came. The others, in the meantime, settled in the cities, in big cities in Serbia. They, in the meantime, somehow integrated into the national economy. They found a job, started their own jobs, or some of them, there are some estimations that, let's say, 30% of them left the country and went abroad as well, mostly in America, then in some of EU countries that opened their, let's say, the borders at that time for those who are coming from Bosnia, from Croatia, and they just passed it through the Serbia and left the country in the meantime during the 90s. So what was on my slide is that the out-migration from the Serbia that was recorded in 2002 were the highest ever. Those were the people who came as refugees or internally displaced persons, and then they left the Serbia once they got the passports, and they made, let's say, that they contributed that 10% was such a high.
Okay, thank you, Natalia. And let me ask you the next one. Is that, well, so it is kind of slightly connected with refugees because, so you were talking about the long-term ones, the ones that were there in the 1990s. I'm not really sure if how the recent refugees are considered, and whether they're considered a potential source of the new wave of refugees, whether they're considered a source of you know, population for rural areas. And you know, I mean, I don't know, has the government thought of helping, you know, providing financial support for people to stay, particularly if you may have some recent refugees who have an attachment to land, to agriculture, who may have good agricultural skills. So, you know, is there any discussion about that? Or?
Yes, there were discussions, and there were a lot of comments, particularly last year when there were the huge wave of immigrants from the Syria and from passing from the Serbia. They are not interested at all to stay in Serbia because according to their opinion, the country is so poor. And now there are those collective centers for those who are passing through the Serbia that are opened in a few, let's say, the spots on their way to Western Europe, but they are, let's say, very welcomed by our government and everything, but they are not interested at all to stay here. They found that country is a reach, that in terms of, let's say, natural potentials and these kind of things, but they are not interested at all in these activities and these kind of jobs.
No. Right, yeah, which is probably, you know, the experience in other countries as well. When you have, when we've had migrants, for example, from largely from Commonwealth countries, from outside the EU, you know, they don't often have an interest in coming into agriculture because they see that as a step back. You know,
yeah.
But interestingly enough, the next generations often rediscover the countryside, you know, and rural. So you might, you know, you sometimes do get that kind of generational change as well. But I'm aware of the time, and I don't think I have any more questions here. So I would, I mean, I think there are so many points of contact, and you know, in terms of your research findings, in terms of what's happening in the EU, and I think, you know, the interesting comments about the way in which the people that originally came in from countries that are part of the EU have decided to take those opportunities and move back to their countries as it were, even though it was 300 years ago. It means an interesting kind of dynamic there, isn't it, that we don't actually hear very much about in the research on EU migration. You know, you don't tend to hear very much about that, although you sometimes get the sense that what they describe as EU migrants have come from, you know, maybe Serbia and other countries, Lithuania, you know, and so on, that, you know, or Russians coming into Lithuania, maybe because of Lithuanians before, and so on. So
what I found is just a very few research from the China that are explicitly focused on the agriculture and the consequences on agriculture, and they deal with the climate changes and these kind of things. But the key issue for those who stayed at the place is the farm size, normally for the countries like the Serbia and these kind of things. But with such a huge immigration, we have to find the way to measure the weight of these developments and the consequences of such a changes. Thank you.
No, well, it sounds a really interesting project, and would be, you know, really interesting to keep in touch with you. And I know that there are Linamar and others who are here at the web, and Ray, who will be interested in it. And certainly Linamar is looking at agricultural temporary workers between Canada and Mexico, and has been looking at the kind of emotional attachment aspects and so on. So there's some interesting dialogue anyway. So thank you very much for agreeing to participate in the webinar. And I think you have quite a few colleagues that have decided to join us as well, from what I can see on the list of people who participated. So I thank them all very much for becoming involved. And we'll email you so that you can be part of, you know, we can include you in the network that we have, which is an email list of people who are interested in similar issues.
Okay, thank you so much. I send my best wishes, and thank you for your patience and your interest for this topic. And we certainly will stay in touch. I hope during the next few months I will have some results, and I will be glad to share it with you. All the best, and thank you so much, Filomena.
Thank you.
As well.
See you soon, hopefully somewhere.
Yeah, best. Bye.
Bye now. Bye.